All right, welcome to a new episode of Cali Claptrap. Today's guest is Jeff Salzman. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure, Matt. Good to be here.
Awesome. So many of you might know Jeff as the host of Daily Volver. It's a post-progressive look at culture and politics and spotlights integrals, thinkers, and movers. Jeff, I was hoping you can talk a little bit about, obviously, looking at your resume, you've been involved with Integral for several years, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how you found Integral or how Integral found you.
Yeah, cool. Well, I've always been a seeker, so I grew up in a Christian church. I was a fundamentalist little kid, and then I became a militant atheist in my teens, and that took me through my 20s. And I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and entered sort of the postmodern, liberal kind of progressive milieu here with lots of spiritual teachers and did all that sort of thing. And I've always been interested in all of it. And and so being in Boulder, I did all sorts of things with the Naropa community and various Hindu teachers and American teachers and mystics and so forth. But I never found my teacher. And like everybody else did, I was actually in the Masters of Divinity program at Naropa University at this point, as sort of a second career.
Can I pause you there real quick? So you went from being a militant atheist to looking to other branches of spirituality. So spirituality at some level was still there and still kind of nipping at your heels a bit.
Yeah, I think militant atheists are often kind of spiritual in their own way. I think I was. But actually, what bounced me out of that was the book, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And basically what it is an intellectual argument for the existence of God. Okay? Yeah. And I hadn't had many of them, and I needed that. And at the end of that, as often happens, I was transmitted. I was transformed. And I actually had a mystical experience, just very much textbook. I felt one with everything for about 2 days. And I woke from a dream of my childhood church with the bell ringing. And so that was actually significant. I mean, I remembered it vividly, but I didn't realize the significance of it until later, when it was like, oh, wait a second. We actually, in our little church, the bell had been closed up and nailed down and was broken. So we never heard it ring.
Yeah.
So here it was ringing. And so that was good. So that got me into, I feel like Carl Jung. It's like, I didn't believe in God. I knew God. God was there, I was saturated in it.
And would you mind talking a little bit about the mystical experience? Was that finding after reading Peck's book, or was it something different?
Yeah, it was the morning after reading stuff. Peck's book. I finished it actually beside a creek with my dog. And, I closed it up and thought, wow, that was great. And then I went home and had dinner, whatever, woke up the next morning in a mystical state. And, and what that is, that's, that's when the ego boundaries dissolve. So instead of perceiving the world as a subject and object, so there's me and then there's everything that isn't me and everybody else isn't me. It's like the whole thing becomes kind of me, or I become it. We get that with psychedelics. We get that with drugs, having meditation. Absolutely. A friend of mine said, having a baby will do it to you. So
it'll definitely kick you out of your old world into a new one. That's for sure.
Yeah. I just remember her talking about bringing her newborn home in the car. And somebody was driving her. She was holding a baby for the first time out of the hospital. And I'll never forget how she put it. She said, I felt like the world was stage lit. And that's how that can feel. The traditions have different ways of talking about it, but it's a heightened self, higher, bigger self.
Yeah. So a bit of unification. And following that dream, did that lead you to go and seek out these different spiritual guides and directions?
I was already in Boulder. So, so I, of course, started reading the books, and I had been involved in what we would call the orange meme, or the modernist secular strata of development, with Dale Carnegie and Think and Grow Rich and that whole genre too.
Yeah.
So I had that. That's kind of sort of secular positive thinking, and how to win friends and influence people, which is really a practice in getting out of yourself and seeing other people, and again, softening those ego boundaries. Anything we can do to do that is to the good.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think, I live in Eugene, Oregon, and I always hear people talk about if they didn't live in Eugene, they would live in Boulder and vice versa. Right. And I know there's something special about this community. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Boulder community, about maybe what attracts you to it, and what do you think makes Boulder special and attracts thinkers like, Wilbur and other integral folks.
Yeah. I mean, it's just demonstrably true that happens. And it's always been a cultural point of the arrow. I mean, we had student riots back in the 60s before anybody else. I wasn't here then. Yeah. But it's true. I mean, actually, it's funny. It's not funny, but going back and seeing those riots in Boulder, Colorado in I think the early 70s, mid 70s, maybe. There was a lot of destruction. They took over the president's office. There's things that if it happened now, CNN, they'd be camped, 100 yards deep here reporting on it. But that happened. There was a big hippie movement here. And really the most significant thing was Chomping Trungpa, who was a hip Tibetan master who had fled Tibet, 15 years old, after living his whole life being groomed to be a Rinpoche priest. He goes to England in the 70s. It's all mod, and he gets all hip, and he starts drinking, and and the whole sex, and so he brings that whole thing. And then we have Allen Ginsberg and the whole disembodied poetics. There's a whole thing, and then also there's tech, and there's a friend of mine once grew tired of Boulder, and she said, "I'm tired of living in a brainwave." She wanted more of a heart wave. And I think there's some truth to that. Boulder's kind of a brainy town of seekers, That's what I'm assuming
it still has a heart vibe to it. I know with the wasn't there a recent shooting there? Yeah. And I thought that emotional outpouring, I remember just sort of being drawn to some of the, obviously when that event happens, I think you have no sort of option left but to release that.
Yeah, it does break through the whole sort of
brainy stuff
thing. Yeah And then also Boulder is in this amazing natural beauty. The Flatirons, you're right at the edge of the Rocky Mountains, and it is exquisite. So there is something to be said for, it's like Sedona and Eugene and other places where is there an actual vortex of geological vibration or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe. It's certainly beautiful to look at.
Yeah, definitely a cultural vortex, I think. You throw in Berkeley
for sure there.
Some other places.
Yeah.
So going back, so you were dabbling in, I see here you got a master's degree in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism.
Yep.
And that was in 2006. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think it is accurate. Although I was certainly on the slow plan. I started that as in the Masters of, this is part of my integral story, but I had a business. I had sold it. I didn't have to work anymore. I was still 40 something years old, and I needed something else to do. And I was always drawn to this. So I decided to get a Masters of Divinity at Naropa, this amazing little kooky Buddhist college here in Boulder that Trungpa founded, and had a whole really beautiful sort of aesthetic about the great Eastern sun, the great rising sun. It has a certain a sense of progress to it, heartened. And I loved that. I like that positivity in a way.
Yeah.
So I went there, and it's a 3-year program. I did all but one class of it actually, and I discovered Ken Wilber. Actually, I had discovered Ken Wilber before, but I discovered that Ken Wilber lived 5 minutes from me. And I had been a Ken Wilber nut. Pretty much after the Scott Peck thing, I discovered. And I'll just tell that story real quickly. I was in a bookstore in Boulder, and I think it was the Lighthouse bookstore, the kind of new agey bookstore. And I don't remember when it was, in the late 80s maybe. And I saw a book on the shelf that said "Up from Eden." And that very phrase shifted. I felt myself cellularly shift, and so many pieces falling into place of, oh, okay, it's up from Eden.
Yeah,
we've evolved. We're not fallen. We haven't been cast out of paradise. We're growing into a conscious paradise.
Yeah,
and that indeed was the message of the book. This is Ken Wilber, and so I'm reading everything he wrote. I bought many books that I shoved down people's throats to no avail.
Yeah.
You either like it or you don't. You either get it or you don't. And I did. And so that was happening. And I did the Masters of Divinity was sort of the closest I could get to sort of that territory, because there was no integral. I didn't know Ken Wilber. I wasn't a groupie. I was a devote. Right. I don't know what I was.
Yeah.
But at some point, a friend of mine, when I was telling her about him, it was actually Tammy Simon, who runs Sounds True.
Cool.
That business. Yeah. And that's here in Boulder too. And she said, I know Ken Wilber. And it turns out that she had done a program with him. And she told him about me, and he got in touch with me. And I had lunch with him and ended up working with him for the next 3 years. And I really dropped out of the MDiv program. I went back. And without doing any more work, just got the Masters in Tibetan Buddhism, which is fine by me. But I got into Integral, and that was, at that point, that was more what I was looking for, because it, although Naropa and so much of what's going on at the cutting edge of culture and spirituality is an integration of spirituality and psychology, and that's Integral in general. Integral wants to integrate all of human wisdom. Sees maps of human wisdom that we want to be friendly to all of it, and so that begins the Integral quest.
Yeah. So going back to something you brought up, and I this was one of my questions. Why do you think Integral clicks with some people and doesn't click for others? Like my big question is, I mean, obviously you were grasped by it, I was grasped by it, and it seems like such an easy solution to some of the problems that are going on, and yet it never really popped. And I was just wondering if you maybe had a take on why. Do you think there's an allergy to it? And what do you think is your opinion on why it clicks for some and doesn't click for others?
Well, for one thing, every stage of development, and that's Integral. I mean, it maps out these stages of development. You can slice and dice in different ways, but we're moving and there's a circular quality to it. There's a linear quality to it. So Integral is growing out of postmodernity. Postmodernity grew out of modernity. Modernity grew out of traditionalism. Traditionalism grew out of warrior kind of tribal. And so all of those, part of growing out of one stage is you just get so fucking sick of it. You can't take it another minute. And so what happens with people who are in green postmodern at some point is that they got the download, about world centrism, about ecology, about psychology, about all of the things about deconstructing the triumphalist narratives of history, deconstructing everything, and hallelujah, it all needed to be deconstructed. That was quite clear after the first half of the 20th century. So that was the rise of that, and so people get adequate to that. And you see that a lot of people now who there's something about the liberal storyline and narrative that is just not enough.
Yeah.
It's ringing a little tinny, and they want something else. And that something else is the next stage of development, which in some ways has, you talk about this, the people have antibodies to Integral. Integral has antibodies to green. Actually. So there's just a natural antipathy between the great mass of the cutting edge of culture, which is green, and integral, which wants to say, wait a second, there are hierarchies. There are stages of development. There are things that are green's allergic to, because in some sense to green, integral feels like the reintroduction of another triumphalist narrative.
Yeah.
And in a sense it is, but it's a narrative that you say, why do some people get integral and some people not? And it's like every stage, it's in your central channel, it's in your chakras, it's some sort of aligning, I don't know what, there's but at some point you're ready to see that this whole system of life from 13.8 billion years ago, when something blew out of nothing, this whole thing is alive. There's something happening here, and we are being lived by it, and we are living it, and we can unfurl our sails. And so you start to see development, which, has scandalous implications to green, which is all about everybody's equal. And, there's no hierarchies, and hierarchies are terrible. And so what integral is saying is, wait a second, we're recognizing a natural hierarchy. There, it's like acorns, saplings, seedlings, and oak trees. It happens in only that direction and not the other way around.
Right.
So anyway, it's there is a natural until you're ready, until you want to feel into that and go with that. And there's not many who do. I mean, people who think about this and do analysis about this think that there are maybe in the developed world 5% of the population has an integral sensibility. A lot of people have it without really having a name for it. They just sort of feel politically homeless. They're sort of sympathetic to everybody. They're not as mad as they need to be at the enemies of the left or right. Right.
So I know I'm thinking of the biblical passage of throwing your pearls before swine and stuff. When I talk about and it automatically puts you in a defensive position. Oh, like you're putting yourself on the top of the spiral, and you're putting me. And I know what Wilbur says about, growth hierarchies and dominator hierarchies, that kind of thing. What is your typical response when you go, oh, Jeff, you're just putting yourself on top, and here am I, at orange or amber? What's your typical?
Try to convince a fundamentalist that there are 3 stages beneath you. Take that. I mean, it's hard to take it out into the marketplace. The only thing I can say is, and this is another Ken Wilber line, is that it is an elitism in the sense that, just as you see that there's 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 16-year-olds, and it's not that one is a 16-year-old is not one iota more precious than an 8-year-old. But does have complexity and capabilities that they gain. And they have things that they've lost, a certain magic, a certain uncomplicated engagement with life that an 8-year-old has that, you lose in a certain way. So it's not that being a later stage development, if you will, is better than higher. I mean, we could do some things and try to make it as horizontal as possible. But then the other answer is, what if it's true? I mean, it would be coy and irresponsible, really, not to, check it out.
Welcomed in the marketplace, with green and sort of the anti-hierarchies and, the other maybe levels where, so now you're putting me on a lower rung. We obviously know the polarization going on right now and stuff. So is it up to integral? I've always sort of wondered too about Ken's, first of all, I think reluctance to be sort of in that spotlight, and that might have changed over the years, obviously with doing integral life and stuff. But is it just for integral to kind of sit on the sidelines and feel like, okay, well, I feel like I know a lot of the solutions to the problems going on, but no one's really wanting to hear me. And do you just kind of go on for your own personal, how do you continue to grow individually? And I'm not sure if there's a question there or too many questions. I'll stop there if you have any response to what
I do. I mean, I think that, when I got with Ken in 2003 and we worked for the next 4 years on the Integral Institute, and we did all these seminars on integral psychology and integral therapy and integral business and integral politics and integral life practice even.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that, and that was successful. Then I started the Boulder Integral, which was a church that we bought here in Boulder, Colorado, and turned into an integral center and had programs that people came from all over the world. We did that for 7 years, and Robert McNaughton did his version of it for another 7 years. And so that was sort of the development of a core of people that that Rolodex continues to exist and expand. And there are people who have been magnetized to it in various ways. Jeremy Johnson, for instance, and many others, the meta-modern people, the Hanzi people, the there's lots of different flavors of it. There's a certain flavor of it just that doesn't want to feel the spirit. I mean, it doesn't want to go spiritual. It just it wants to be secular. That's the meta-modern. And they still see development, and they still, the idea is let's be friendly to all these stages. It's like you can't make an 8-year-old be a 16-year-old.
Right.
An 8-year-old is not a defective 16-year-old. It's like they get to be here. They get to be who they are. And we see this culturally. I mean, we're seeing it in, horrible technicolor in Afghanistan right now. There's a stage that sort of tribal, that holy warrior. If you have a chart, you could put a chart up for people to, you can see these stages of development. There's a warrior culture where you've got to fight. Fighting is what you do. If you don't fight, you're irresponsible. That's and that's a lot of human history was that stage. And then there's a civilizing effect of that stage. It came online with the axial religions. It comes online with human beings, when they want to join the Boy Scouts, or they just want to be good. They want Jesus to love them. They want to be good boys and good girls. That's a stage, and that's the Taliban's in that stage, and you can't make them be secular. I mean, that you're asking them to disenchant their world. They're living in a world that is lit up by God, the Holy Spirit, their version of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also ties back, and to get your other opinion before forgetting this tangent, was it almost seems, I talked with you before the recording here a little bit about what drew me to Integral. And for me, it was about seeking other people that identify with Integral and try to get that sense of community. And what I found in Integral is it wasn't all a utopian vision, right? There's even rifts that you have some folks that are, it almost seems, anti-development, anti-hierarchical thinking, stage reductionism, that kind of stuff. And even in the sense of the community, I still find like, okay, well, I guess, for me too, still trying to find my place in it. It seems to make sense, but I'm even surprised within the community to still find people maybe not really directionalists, but still having some rifts. And I was wondering, obviously you're more in the center of that. Do you find that, or do you think it's pretty harmonized with maybe some outliers?
No, not harmonized. I mean, in a way, that's what it was the next stage after the monolithic vision of Ken Wilber. We had, we called it the multiplex, all these websites that we were trying to launch at the same time. And it just didn't work, outside of theory, it worked in theory. But so what we have is, it's not just, it's a movement. It's a movement of history. It's a movement of human consciousness. There are people at this stage of development, and life conditions, always the sort of the theory is that life conditions is, actually in ancient Greece, there were this moment of life conditions where people shot into modernity. I mean, it happens through history. This is a frothy thing, this evolution in cultural evolution. We have these stages, but they're not lockstep. And so, right now, well, go on.
I was going to say, for you personally, do you just try to put yourself in the best life conditions and still to foster your own personal growth as far as where you are at in your life at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I have I've done a lot of practice, and I'm 67. I mean, I don't have to slay any more dragons. I do my podcast, and part of what I do at my podcast is I just try to point out, they're pointing out instructions in spiritual practice a lot. What I try to point out is how evolution is happening kind of under its own power. I just want to point that out to people.
Yeah. And you do.
And you don't have to be, you're not responsible for making it happen. It's not the integral movement or the evolutionary movement. We don't have to get our act together at all.
Right.
We just have to see it in ourselves and in the world.
Yeah. And you do a beautiful job of that. And thank you for the reminders that evolution is messy. And sometimes, you those different perspectives, and it does help for the listeners traveling to hearing that every now and then. It's a welcomed change from some of the news feeds that are out there. I did want to ask a little bit more about you're sort of maybe bringing it up more, but identifying with that post-progressive. And and you kind of work with Steve McIntosh's group, who we interviewed on Growing Down and stuff. And if you can maybe summarize best how you define post-progressivism.
Yeah, post-progressivism is kind of the political line of all this. We're not working with the spiritual, and we're not working with the psychological and interpersonal. It's the political, and it's just this recognition that, again, the progressive line, the MSNBC line, if you will, has become inadequate.
Yeah,
for a lot of people. I mean, they're actually. I want to check in on Fox News. Actually, I don't want to believe them either. But I want to know what they're saying, and I actually want to see that there's a piece of the truth, so that is, that's what we're trying to do is point that out and connect with other people who are doing it.
And is progressivism equal to integral politics, or do you think it's something different?
I would say it is. I mean, what it is, and this is what we're actually doing. So what you're talking about is, it's the Institute for Cultural Evolution. It was started a few years ago by Steve McIntosh and some people. Steve McIntosh is another great integral philosopher, who's written several books. His latest one is called Developmental Politics. It's lays out integral politics in, I think, a beautiful way. And what it is, and this is what the Institute is doing right now, is coming up with position papers on the issues of our time, where they're looking for what they call a win-win-win solution. That is a solution that is going to give progressives what they want, the green postmodern liberal meme, what they want. To give secularists, modernists, who just basically want the train to run on time, and they really do rely on the science for the most part, And then the traditionalists, the God and country people. And, the God and country people have a natural antipathy to government. The liberals have a natural antipathy to corporations. We see all of that. We try to be, the idea is not, this shouldn't be happening. We we need to make everybody get in line with what the truth is. It's like the truth is a moving, frothy spiral of development. And at Integral, we get friendly with that whole thing. And we realize that, just as an evolution of animals in the field and forests, a lot of it's from war. We fight our way forward. We should be fighting, actually. And this is a radical friendliness to the culture war that I talk about a lot on the Daily Evolver. That, where it's in addition to the fight itself, which is hard enough, we have to have this sense that we shouldn't be doing this. Why are we doing this? It's like we're doing this because we're evolving. We're fighting our way forward. We're also friending our way forward. And that's one of the things that's not often pointed out in these meta crises and the Jesus Christ, these scenarios of doom, is that there's a re-raveling going on. It's not just unraveling, it's re-raveling all the way up and all the way down. So that I find, I hate the word hopeful because it's not hopeful. I actually like the word faithful.
Yeah.
Because it's a recognition that this has been the trajectory of evolution for 13.8 billion years. An ever unfolding complexity of, at some point we can recognize it as good, true, and beautiful.
Yeah.
And beautiful, but not pretty. And that's that distinction we were just talking about.
Okay. And with just the final thought on the win-win-win, because I like that scenario, is the idea to sort of get these sort of answers to policies and issues with sort of how do you satisfy these three major stages?
Yes.
And to put them all together to go, okay, well, here's how we can win.
Yeah.
And just kind of try to slowly push that forward and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I think, when you talk about getting together and what we're doing as a community or movement and so forth, part of what we're doing is we're thinking. I mean, I love one of the things Ken Wilber said is that people thought modern thoughts for 300 years before the French Revolution.
Yeah.
There's something about just, getting in there and sorting it out and, and making a home for the people who are just natural allies, not allies, but just naturally integral. They're interested in it. It makes sense that for a lot of people, when they, for me, seeing the book Up from Eden, my cells changed, my life changed. I was a different person, really. And that's each stage. I was a different person when I accepted Jesus as my savior. I was a different person when I dropped Jesus as my savior. I was a different person when I came to Boulder and kissed all the frogs, and I'm a different person now. And that's hallelujah. That's welcome to human evolution and the evolution of each one of us.
Awesome. Well, just to wrap it up with a couple quick questions, open-ended. Looking back, I know a lot of times people say, well, there's like a destiny to my life to be drawn to where I am now. Do you feel like there is a destiny to kind of how you ended up where you are right now and all the good fortune you ended in?
Yeah, I do, actually. I mean, I've had the wonderful circumstance of having met my three big heroes in a way. One was Tom Peters, who wrote the book In Search of Excellence back in the day. And this is a big, big business book. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for years. Big book about changing your attitude about business. It was a big book in my own success. And I got to know him as a friend.
Nice.
And then I got to know Scott Peck as a friend. And I didn't really, it was all sort of professional because I produced seminars. And so I, worked with them, but became friends with them. Nice. And then the same with Ken Wilber, and that I lived in Boulder and I got drawn here. I don't know, I do like, and this is part of what, we talk about the Integral project is we want to integrate the best of postmodernity, the best of modernity, best of traditionalism. We also want to integrate the best of these pre-traditional stages, which are mythic and magic. And in these stages, something
that I've with Wilber's philosophy as well that I kind of keep going back to in thought is this direction of Eros, right? And also how do you embrace that in the moment with all the uncertainty that we have going on in our lives? How do you be a witness to that drive or direction in ourselves, in your family, in your neighbor, and what is that like, that living religion? And so I guess my last question for you is kind of a wrapped up one, but how do you deal with the uncertainty of the moment, but also find the good, the true, and the beautiful in it?
Yeah, well, this is what I was getting at. It's you re-enchant the world. You get in that, indigenous people, tribal people, they live in a magical world. So did children.
Yeah.
And that world, it's there. It's that strata didn't go away in humanity or in each one of us. And so what's a re-enchanted world? That's a good question. First of all, that's a nice koan. What does your life enchanted look like? But just for starters, it's like the hero's journey. You're the hero of your story. Everything that happens to you is dripping with meaning. Every person you meet, every circumstance of your life, it should be happening. It's not that it shouldn't be happening. It should be happening. Right. And that all of these things that you're contracted around and afraid of are to be turned toward. And you're supposed to reach your hand out. And, you know, they'll either, maybe they'll cut your head off, but what a relief. You know, so it's just that kind of thing. I think that's, for modern people, a sort of a, you know, it's easy to sort of do it superficially, but superficial is better than nothing. You know, I mean, I'm all for, you know, hypocrisy is the stage and the path. but you do that. This just becomes a practice of, you know, nature, certainly. One's relationships. I mean, oh my God, these people, you know, they're driving me crazy, but they're the characters in my story.
Absolutely. Well, I like this re-enchantment. We talked about meditation, sort of that losing that ego boundary. So right now with all the psychedelic sort of therapy that's going on, that's the way I think of the world, trying to re-enchant it. It's wonderful.
Awesome. So that's Integral can do that. And that's what I'm trying to do at the Daily Volver. And I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. That's a wonderful conclusion. Thank you so much for being on. Continue your good work. And I look forward to more of your podcast.
Likewise. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Jeff.